Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Geller. I am the chair of the South Florida Regional Planning Council. I would like to welcome everybody here today, both live and on whatever, is it Zoom or? Okay, Zoom. There are so many platforms today, I'm never sure which one we're actually using. I was on WebEx recently, and that was the first time I'd used WebEx in a long time. Thank you for being here, and I will ask I'll ask everyone to rise, and Councilmember Furr, if you will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated, and let me ask Kathy, or over there, can you please call the roll and announce if we have a quorum or a quorum of the executive board? You will need to use a mic. Do you have one? Because remember, people are watching on Zoom, attending on Zoom.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I did?
Slightly.
Come on. Bailey?
Present.
Kaplan?
Present.
Cates? Cordino?
I'm here.
Furr?
Here.
Garcia? Gilbert? Goldberg?
Present.
Gilbert?
Present.
Thank you. Goldberg? Thank you. Orland? Here. Hoffman? Lincoln? Here. McGee? Ross?
Here.
Udine?
Here.
Geller? Andriotta?
Attorney, do we have a quorum present?
Yeah, Andriotta?
Although they won't count for quorum anyhow. But
I just,
okay, please continue.
Andriotta? Win?
Shirini Fong for that win.
Villaboy? Thank you.
Bernie Gorin, you're recognized, sir. And these are battery operated, so please, when you are done speaking, shut them. It's the only way we'll last through the meeting.
Good afternoon, good morning, we're good. Mr. Chair and members of the council, for the record, under section 120.525 subsection 4 of the Florida statutes adopted in 2020, you have a legal quorum under the statute where a third of your membership is physically present and the balance or the remainder of which and of whom are on the gallery prepared to do business of the public. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gorin. I would like to thank Monroe County for hosting us here. I know we don't get down here often enough. It is technically, the legal term is, it is quite a schlep for some of us, but I know it is just as much a schlep for you when you come up to Broward. So, you know, in fairness, that's why we're here. And I believe we're in Dade County at our next meeting.
No, Broward, but we can move things.
But we had a meet. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. We had the meeting in Dade County, which I was planning on going to until Brightline broke. Choo-choo, no go. I was on the train, but the train didn't go. Okay. So we do try and meet in all of the counties that we represent. And at this point in time, I would like to recognize Councilmember Lincoln and ask Councilmember Lincoln to first, actually, give me one second. Okay. I would like to also welcome a new member to our board, Armando Luis Villaboy, ex officio from the South Florida Water Management District, seated at the end. Mr. Villaboy, did you want to make any brief comments?
Hello. Perfect. Good morning. My name is Armando Villaboy. I work the External Affairs Office for South Florida Water Management District, covering Miami-Dade, Broward, and Monroe County, so the southern end for the district. Before that time, I worked with the governor's office for a few years and also with the city of Miami. Glad to be here. And if there's any questions for the district, please let me know. I'd be happy to facilitate and or help with any questions or concerns you may have.
Greg Ross.
Thank you, sir. And let me briefly comment that at every town meeting I have, and basically every other place I speak, I comment on the number one threat to South Florida being that in approximately 13 years, we will be underwater every time it rains, and there is nothing we can do about it. And I'm sure you've heard me speak about this at the South Florida Water Management District. Commissioner Furr has also taken an aggressive lead on this. And since I had a town meeting in Cooper City, Mayor Ross, who's on the line, can also comment that every place I go, I speak about this. So just reminding you. So again, thank you, sir, for being here. We look forward to working with you. Councilmember Lincoln, if you would like to recognize, I know that we have, well, I know we have Representative Mooney here. I am not sure which other representatives from your county are here. Virtually what county administrator, resilience, whoever. So let me just turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair Geller, and welcome to Monroe County and the fabulous Florida Keys. Woo! Super excited and proud of our county, especially right now. It is our 200th bicentennial celebration, which is why you all have a Monroe County Challenge coin at your seat, which has our logo on the one side and then our 200th logo on the opposite side. So thank you all for taking the beautiful drive from the mainland down to the southernmost county in the state of Florida and in the United States of America. And Chair Geller, our county has taken
I should have recognized you as the secretary of the South Florida Regional Planning Council.
Thank you. And I want to recognize that Sam Kaufman is also here, and he represents Key West, which is the southernmost of the southernmost of the southernmost. And Chair Geller, I have to tell you that our county has taken the water issues seriously, and we will not be underwater in 15 years. Because we are working diligently with our House Rep Jim Mooney and with my guest on the line today, which is Rhonda Haig, who is our Director of Resiliency, our Chief Resiliency Officer. And we also have Lisa Tennyson on Zoom as well. And she is our Director of Legislative Affairs. And between those two and Representative Jim Mooney, we in Monroe County are doing everything we can to capture all of the resiliency, Florida resiliency funds that are coming through the pipeline and are doing in my opinion, a remarkable job on making sure that we have the infrastructure and that's going to be raised during as we identify which roads are going to go underwater, and we are totally prepared for what is going to be happening. So I don't know when you want Rhonda Haig to speak, but with that want to say again, thank you and welcome to Monroe County.
Thank you. And if Mr. Gastasi is on the line, I don't know if he is, but if he is, would you like to introduce him?
If he was here, I would. Unfortunately, I just received a text from him and he had something that came up and he is actually in Marathon. So that's how our county rolls.
We understand. And would you like to introduce, the way I have it on our agenda is our first speaker would be Representative Mooney, followed by Rhonda Haig. So would you like to introduce each of them?
Did. Yes, it is my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce our State Representative Jim Mooney, who is local from Alamorada, born and raised in the fabulous Florida Keys. He's lived here his entire life, loves the Keys. He used to be a councilman for the city of Alamorada, so he completely understands government and understands the needs of our small municipalities all the way up to our county and his entire district. He's remarkable and does a wonderful job advocating for us, and it is my pleasure to introduce him today.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much.
Representative Mooney, thank you for being here
Accolades
today
are
and you're
not
recognized, sir.
necessary. Yeah, it's an honor to be here and a pleasure to be here and represent House District 120. As most of you know, it's a very dynamic district because you take the tail, Key West, where Sam has to deal with everything that happens down there, and it's dynamically different than the Middle Keys, which is dynamically different than the Upper Keys, which is dynamically different than the mainland of House District 120. So when you talk about schlepping, man, this is a district you schlep in the county you schlep in. So Sam drives 85 miles up here, actually 100 miles up here, 100 miles up here. With that said, talking about being underwater, my first session in the House, I sat down with Representative Bartleman out of the Fort Lauderdale area, Broward County area, and she's a wonderful.
Be a constituent of mine and
okay.
Apportionment. She's now a mile outside me.
Is she? Yeah. Well, she's a great representative for you. I can tell you that for that whole area. And one of the things she came to me about was resiliency. Because when we talk about resiliency, it's always about the coastal aspects of it. Well, we all know about sea level rise. We're not going to pretend it's not happening. We're not going to pretend it hasn't happened before. And after it recedes again, when we're 3 million years gone, it'll start its process back over again. But what is seldom talked about is the impacts of the resiliency for inland communities. Because most of these communities, we all know, particularly in the mainland, particularly in that West End, whole South Florida area, built in the Everglades, they were built in swamps, they were dredged out. You have sinking infrastructure. You just don't have what was needed, the foresight needed for the future. It looked really good back in the day. It happens here. We see roads sinking. The houses aren't sinking; they're on pilings in the solid rock, but the roads are sinking. They were all dredged and filled. So there was a lot of mistakes made in the past that at least we now recognize that can be improved upon and hopefully built upon. But that resiliency aspect for the mainland, the flooding, again, is not so much the coastal right now, but coastal has its own issues. But the majority of people don't live on the coast. They live inland. And they're the ones that suffer, not for a day. When the king tides come and they go. When rains hit for 2 or 3 days, it's weeks of disaster. So part of what I try and focus on in Tallahassee is the resiliency aspect and how do you deal with that in already built structures and infrastructures. And I think a lot of that, and I'm starting to see it in some areas, is thinking outside the box, which I think is very important. South Florida Water Management is doing a great job of now, doing seepage walls to stop flooding in South Florida and the Redlands in that area, and getting the fresh water flowing where it needs to be flowing back in the Florida Bay. So these tentacles that are out there are very, very diverse. And so one arm does this, another arm does that, and they're dynamically different again. I think thinking outside the box is very important for the future of South Florida. Very important. The homes aren't going to go. We don't get to start over. In Tallahassee, as you well know, you spent an eon up there. Yeah, it felt like it. I'm sure 3 years. It feels like it. There's this mindset that you snap your fingers and you fix it. We don't have that luxury. We don't get to knock down Orlando again and start over with better roads. We don't get to knock down all of South Florida and start over with the correct infrastructure. So how do we deal with that? We have to be innovative. We have to be creative. We have to be willing to take the steps necessary to make it happen. A lot of it will have to do with the ABC alphabets that control the permitting process. We need to be a little more in touch with them. And I don't mean in a cozy way. I mean like a little more stern. This year, Ian destroys Daytona Beach, a great example. The mindset is we need more seawalls. Next question is we need $500 million for sand restoration. Well, that doesn't work. It doesn't go hand in hand. The agencies will give you a permit for seawalls to be rebuilt, but they won't give you a permit to build new sand dunes because now you're doing something else. I mean, it's upsetting sometimes to think about, like, they're not working hand in hand. I saw a great presentation first session, living shorelines and all this wonderful stuff. And if you're a state contractor, you can do this. It doesn't matter. I raised my hand like a first grader. I say, so if you talk to the local communities, if you talk to the local planning commissions in the cities and counties, no, we haven't. So you're telling me a state contractor can do something that's outside the scope of the comprehensive land use plan, the LDRs? Yes, so that's really not going to work very well. Are you going to loosen up some of your rules and regulations so that communities can do living shorelines? Well, we don't like to change the rules. So if you don't like to change the rules and you're going to do something that's outside the scope of the rules over here, that's just, we're not gaining ground. And we have got to bring these agencies together and let them know. And I have not stopped that conversation one time. I give them the same spiel every time. That's not going to work. I'm not afraid to say it's not going to work. And again, you know, you're tasked with controlling all of this at the development level. You know, the encroachments heading towards the Everglades are continuing. I understand the dynamics of money and all that and a number of people. But we also, when you talk about resiliency, I don't want it to ever be lost. Infrastructure obviously is very important. Our infrastructure was built, it's antiquated. But a great example of what can be done was the project over there just north of Fort Myers Beach. What's it called? Want to survive without losing your electric during it's a ranch or something like that. Babcock Ranch, amazing. But when you talk about also resiliency, let's not forget that as we start to deal with more and more water issues, we start to think about moving people. When you move people, you displace people. What are we going to do with people who are displaced? But the money's going to follow the dry ground. I don't think that that's ever been an issue in history. Money will follow the dry ground, but what about the people who are living on the dry ground that can't afford to go somewhere else? These are real issues. These are not political issues. They're not party line issues. These are real issues. And it's important that we not only talk about working with the infrastructure, the resiliency, but also the housing component. And with that, comes security. So you guys have your hands full to do it right. And I commend you for sitting here and doing what you do, because it's not easy. Very few people, it's easy to throw rocks at everybody here when they see a decision you've made. It's hard for them to go sit there and make that decision themselves. So with that, if there's any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer. But, you know, I think that you guys do a great job in the big picture of life. And I, again, applaud you for that.
Thank you, Representative Mooney. I have to tell you, I found your remarks excellent. Appreciate them. Again, having served in the House for 9 years and the Senate for 11, I know how difficult a job it is that you have. I would like to make two brief comments to you. Well, one not quite as brief. In reference to the Everglades encroachment, I expect that the South Florida Regional Planning Council will be having a vote on that in November, pertaining to some of the proposed expansions in Miami-Dade to the urban development boundary. So if you would like, you're probably will be either in committee meetings or way too far to drive. But if you'd like your office to be notified, we will let you know about the October meeting. So perhaps you can have a staff member attend via Zoom. So Ms. Cosio, if you can make sure that when we schedule that meeting for the Dade County proposed changes.
Chair Garris, I will follow up personally, but my understanding is that all the members of our legislative delegations.
Yes, but if you can just, great, thank you. And secondly, since you mentioned this, you shouldn't have, because now I'm going to explain briefly. The inland water, and I need two hands for this, so can you still hear me? Okay. The reason is, everywhere I go, I do this because we're going to be underwater and there's nothing we can do about it anymore in Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade. And the reason is our climate, official climate, is either tropical rainforest or tropical monsoon. Either of those means it rains a lot. And the way that, as you pointed out accurately, and by the way, I'm a former chair of Senate Ag Committee, so spent a lot of time on that. The way that South Florida was created for housing and for living purposes is in the 40s and 50s, the Army Corps of Engineers dug these major drainage canals. And that's how we drain when it rains, and it rains frequently. We have two problems. Number one, rainfall is increasing by 20%. Not really, it's still about 38 inches a year, but it's coming in more concentrated bursts of rain. So when that occurs, we get a lot of rain in a short period of time, and it's worsening because of heating, global heating. And as a result of that, we need to be able to drain. When the drainage canals were built, they're all gravity operated. They worked fine when inland water was here and ocean water was here. You have the salinity control barriers in the canal. When we needed to drain, they'd raise the barrier, the water pressure would force the water underneath it, and it would go from the west towards the ocean. And everything was hunky-dory as long as inland is here and ocean is here. But over the years, ocean has been rising. I'm not going to get into a debate as to why. I have my opinion, you may have yours, but everybody will agree it's rising. And as a result, there is less and less storage capacity in the canals. According to Dr. Jennifer Hirado, who I think is, if not the foremost water expert in Florida, certainly one of the top ones, in about 13 years, they'll be at this. So twice a day, at the high tide every day, not in king tides, but every day, ocean water, inland water will be at the same, meaning it'll be unable to drain. A few years after that, ocean water will be higher than inland water, and our salinity control barriers are currently today being overtopped from the ocean at high tides. Well, excuse me, at not the moon tides, the king tides. But 13 years from now, it's going to happen all the time. So this is, when that happens, we will not be able to drain. And if we remember what happened in Fort Lauderdale 6-8 weeks ago, I think every time we get 4 inches of rain, not 26 inches, if we get 4 inches of rain and we can't drain, we have serious problems. Now, some problems, I don't know how to solve sea level rise. I know how to fix this, but the Army Corps has to do it because they control the canals. The big problem is it's about $10 billion. What we know how to fix it. We need to take out this existing salinity control barriers, but actually we need new ones in first. We need to replace them with big, giant Hawker's salinity control barriers. And since water doesn't flow uphill, we can't rely on gravity any longer. We need big, giant pumps. And then, since if we just pump it over these water control barriers and we don't raise the banks of the canals, which we can do through either seawalls or berms, it's just going to flood everything on both sides, which are normally in Broward and Dade and Palm Beach, heavily inhabited or commercial. So we have to raise the canals. Now, we know how to fix it, but we don't have the money to do that. And I've been yelling at this for the last 5 years or so. And about 5 years ago, the Army Corps told me, if they had all of the money that they need and all of the authorizations that they need, and they don't run into any problems and everything goes right, they could finish in 15 years. Well, we started that 5 years ago. We probably could have finished it before the flooding, which is estimated to be 13 years, about like this. When I asked them a couple of months ago, the Army Corps is extremely consistent. They told me 15 years a couple months ago. I am confident if I ask them in 4 or 5 years from now, they're still going to be consistent and tell me another 15 years. In fairness to them, they still don't have the money or the authorizations from the federal government. So the reason I tell this to everybody is not because I'm screaming helplessly. We need our congressional delegations to help us. Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz has taken a very active role. I have heard nothing from any other member of the congressional delegation, nor from either of our 2 United States senators. We are elected and appointed government officials. We must work on contacting our federal delegation because again, if they approve everything next year, and if the Army Corps says 50, and if everything goes right, we know they're talking 20 or 25, really. It's too late to prevent flooding every time it rains. All we can do is minimize that period. And in closing on that, what I normally don't give fiscal advice, but I do on this topic, and it's to invest in companies that build arks and houseboats, because that's what we're going to be needing in South Florida every time we have bad rain. I think this is the biggest issue facing South Florida, and I hope that more people will talk to our congressional delegation and talk to people like Representative Mooney, because again, we also need the state to come up. I believe this is a 50-40-10, and the South Florida Water Management District, God bless them, has actually they have recognized the problem. They have recently been taking steps to actually fix this. Thank you for that. And I hope you will be taking additional steps, and I'm not going to get any further into that, but the problem really is not at our local or state, it's the federal, and we must work in our congressional delegation. Did anybody else have any questions or comments for Representative Mooney? Anyone else? If not, Commissioner Furr, you're recognized, sir. It takes a second to warm up.
Check. Okay, good. First of all, thank you for being here very much. I see you're on the Infrastructure Strategies Committee, correct?
Yes.
You represent the one area that actually has advanced water treatment in the state, correct?
Correct.
Are you the only one? Is this the only area that has that?
Well, I don't know if we're the only area in the state, but we're certainly at the top of the list.
I think you might be.
We may be, but I know that we're right there at the top.
But I don't think, and I think it becomes, and I hate to throw this at you, but
No.
the rest of the representatives need to hear your experience, because they need to know. We're about to get hit on a couple things. We're going to have to redo our entire wastewater treatment plant, as is Miami-Dade, as is lots of other places, for various reasons. We had outfall reasons. Now we're going to have the PFAS legislation that's coming down from the EPA in December. All those things are going to require all of us to rethink how we're doing wastewater treatment. You guys have the only answer so far. And what you're doing is excellent. But I would venture to say most of the other representatives do not have an idea of what that infrastructure is, what it's capable of, and what are the benefits. And my hope is that you can spread that word.
Thank you. Just real quick, thank you, because I think we're on the same page pretty much. So I do preach poop a lot in Tallahassee. I do, because what I hear up there is very disturbing. We can't afford it. Well, Sam knows and Michelle knows that Monroe County spent well over $1 billion. Now the deal is 50-50 split. I think we know how that works with government as well. It did not turn out to be a 50-50 split. It's been a very slow process, but for the most part, the citizens of this county has paid for every penny of it. And I get sort of silly up there a little bit, because I'm like, you know what? Every afternoon at 5 o'clock, the kids are on the tricycles and dad's got a bush light. Nobody lost their house. Life goes on because the fear factor in Washington, Donna Shalala, Senator Shalala said, would you please come preach to my district? Please come. We were down there with the marathon contingency. I don't know if Key West was with us in DC, but we were explaining how we did it and how it was paid for and how it works. And again, it's very frustrating in Tallahassee to hear some communities like, we just can't do it. So I went into Speaker Renner's office one day and I said, you know, because he brought me in actually to talk about a little about, because its passion is clean water and resiliency and septic to sewer conversions. And I said, look, I said, if you're waiting for a council, city council, or county commission to say we're spending $4 billion today on sewer, well, hell will freeze over. They're just not going to do that. So we didn't have an option. And as much as I hate mandatory anything in life, that was probably the greatest mandatory, well, next to being area of critical state concern, the two greatest things that happened in Monroe County ever were both mandatory. And I think it was a wonderful decision on the state's part. But I do preach it. And I always tell people up there, I said, if you guys are serious about this at all, I will put together a team from Monroe County. We'll come out there and tell you exactly how we did it to the penny. Exactly. It's a proven model. It works. I mean, we had, if somebody couldn't afford a lateral from their home to the easement, we had multiple ways to help that homeowner. Multiple. They had to take a penny out of their pocket, not a penny, and that they're hooked up. You know, and Key West was very, I mean, Key West, Sam deals with flooding all the time, and that's, you know, it's just because of historical stuff. It was great when nobody lived there. It wasn't a big deal, but a lot of people are in Key West now. So yeah, I preach it all the time in Tallahassee. I do. It's one of my passions because I'm a fifth generation Floridian. I have 2 grandbabies and now 7th generation Floridians, and it means something to me. And clean water is so important to our future. You know, we're not going to solve all the problems. I think the chair is right. We got a multitude of issues that we just won't be able to deal with. But to some degree, we are tasked with doing it. If we don't do it, we're letting everybody down in the future. It's not what I'm here for. I could be water skiing right now in theory. I'm here because I care, and everybody here is because they care. And I think that's so important. So when you get home, you just got to push the button, man. You cannot. I tell people come to my office, particularly kids, I'm like, you know, you get sucker punch, you get up, you get off the ground, it hurts for a second, and you're done. But when somebody leans on you for weeks at a time, you get pretty tired, you fall over, you can't get up. Well, that's what I do up there. I lean on people. What are you doing about your sewer? What are you doing about your sewer? What are you doing about your sewer? Why haven't you done this? Why aren't you doing that? They don't have good answers. I think you know that. They don't have good answers. And they're afraid to say it. And again, I guarantee that Commissioner Lincoln would be happy to put together a team along with myself and Alamorada and Marathon and Key West and say, guys, if 68,000 people can spend $1.1 billion, then certainly you can do that. Certainly you can do that. And there's no excuse not to do it.
I think you said, when you said they feel like they can't afford to, it was. When you say they can't afford to, they actually can't afford not to.
Correct.
And that's the answer that needs to come.
Yep.
And I know in Broward, the 27 regional wastewater treatment plants have now just signed together to put a white paper together. I say that because I would like to be able to lead them your way. So that I'm sure they're looking at it as well. And I don't know what you all do with your sludge. What do you guys do with your sludge?
Yeah, we haul it.
Okay. Because the problem with us is we send it all up to north, and they don't want it anymore, which I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. And especially when it's not good for the soil anymore. So anyway, I appreciate you being on that committee and what you're doing.
If you ever need anything, certainly you know where I'm at. And
Yeah, and thank you for being willing to spread that word on it. Appreciate it.
no worries.
Thank you, Councilmember Furr. Councilmember Kaufman, and then we need, unless I see anybody else, we need to move on after that. Councilmember Kaufman, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, sir. Representative Mooney, thank you for being here. On this topic of resiliency and also wastewater, Commissioner Furr talks about our AWT facility in Key West, which is state of the art, which is connected with our stormwater systems as well. But keep in mind that once you have the facility, there's the costs of maintenance and then eventual, believe it or not, replacement These facilities do not last forever. Our facility is now 25 or 30 years old. We're coming on to the need for planning to replace our facility. So the question is, and by the way, anyone who wants a tour of our wastewater facility, please, let's get it together, because it is really an important thing to view. It's hard to get there, but yes. Sorry. Oh, in any case,
I want to know where it is.
oh, in Key West. Yeah, yes, on Fleming Key. It's in Key West. But in any case, my question is, you mentioned funding. Is there an appetite at all in Tallahassee to support some funding for these types of things? Or are you saying basically the cities and the counties are on their own?
No, I think there's an appetite for it. I think what you see up there, I'm 3 years into this. What I've seen personally is that there's a lot of backlash from communities that had, even if it's not advanced wastewater treatment, they just haven't maintained them. So I was going to run a bill last year. Unfortunately, I didn't get a Senate sponsor because we got a little late. So to check, the bill was designed, it wasn't my bill, but it was brought by an advocate out of Tampa. And it was, the gist of it was to hit every facility in the state of Florida and ask them simple questions. When was it built? What are your treatment standards? And when were you last upgraded? Because if you're going to expend funds, you want to expend funds for people who have not upgraded their system. So you may have an older system that's actually in better shape than a newer system that hasn't been maintained, because you hit the nail on the head. Maintenance is critical. Now, I feel fortunate. I think Monroe County does a pretty good job of maintaining equipment. We all know that, Key Largo Wastewater District is constantly, Alamorada, we're connected at the hip with them. And it's a constant upgrade. And if you don't do that, but eventually it will eventually wear out, no matter how many times you upgrade it. But yeah, I think there's an intrinsic value to wanting to help people, but also I think the state is, for me, in 3 short years, it's very clear that those who don't want to help themselves don't get a lot of help either out of the state of Florida. I think that probably has been ringing true forever. And I don't think that's wrong, by the way. But I think there are also some nuances in there that would allow some, hey, listen, here's what we've done. I will tell you that when you go up there and say, here's what we've done, but we need this, I think that is a better standing than saying, we haven't done anything in 30 years and now we're in trouble. And I've had them in my office this year. Now, being the whip of the appropriations committee, that also gets you a lot of new friends very quickly. And a lot of those people that came in the office looking for money was about wastewater and sewer, just upgrades and replacements. And I mean, some people are still using wooden pipes and clay pipes, and it's quite archaic. All of which ties back into resiliency and everything else. It is not a simple subject. It's certainly not for the lighthearted, but yeah, I think there's some ability to make that happen. And I think Monroe County would be a great example. Look, here's what we've done, but we still need this.
Thank you, Councilmember Kaufman. I had said that this would be the last question, but we will take one more question on Zoom. Former Chair Bailey, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll make this very brief. I just wanted to thank President Mooney for being here. It's been really refreshing to watch his journey. He takes on a lot of issues that are sometimes not popular, but it takes courage, because long-term planning takes courage. A lot of times it's not sexy because the project will be completed after they're long gone. And so just thank you, Representative Mooney, for your courage and your long-term planning. It's something our state really needs.
Thank you, Mario.
Thank you, former Chair Bailey. And in closing, Representative Mooney, again, I've certainly enjoyed listening to you. I think the state needs legislators that have the foresight that you have, and thank you for being here today, sir. At this point in time, we have a time certain in 13 minutes, give or take. So let's try and get in Rhonda Haig before that. Councilmember Lincoln, if you will do the introductions. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair Geller. And it is my pleasure to introduce via Zoom Rhonda Haig, who is our Chief Resilience Officer for Monroe County. She's also a very active member in the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact Steering Committee. Try saying that twice. We're so blessed in Monroe County to have Rhonda and her expertise and her ability to look at an item 50,000 feet up and then all the way down on the ground and accomplish everything that she accomplishes with all of the projects she does. And with that, no further ado, Rhonda, the Zoom is
Okay.
yours.
Thank you for being here today, Ms. Haig. You're recognized.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to turn off my video just to ensure you get a good thing here. Okay, let's go ahead and share my screen and we'll get going. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to roll. Okay, we're going to talk real quick today. I'm going to go fast about what we're doing in Monroe County. One of the things I'm most proud of you're going to hear me talk about is our partnership with all of our municipalities. So we follow the climate compact projections. We're looking at a lot of water, just like you heard all morning long here. Another foot in the next 20 years by the 2045, another 23 inches in another few short years after that. By 2100, we're looking at 5.5 feet of water. It's a lot of water coming in 78 years. Hopefully those projections will be able to be reduced if the world's climate change efforts are successful. What we're doing here in Monroe County, we've been busy for the last 10 years gathering a lot of data and doing a lot of research. So we've kind of moved into that whole plan where we're now doing a lot of implementation. If you all know where Pigeon Key is, that's that small island down by 7 Mile Bridge. On that pretty little island where we do a lot of education. We got a $50,000 grant there to help make that more resilient. So we've got plans underway for that. $120,000 watershed management plan. Excuse me, just a moment here. Is underway. So we have to update our watershed management plan. As you all know, we have a CRS rating of 3. In order to maintain that, you have to update your watershed management plan every 5 years. And so with that, we've just started that update so that we can ensure we can hang on to that CRS rating of 3. We are finally finalizing our vulnerability assessment. We've done 3 different versions now. We're on our final version, hopefully, just to meet the state requirements to add in rainfall analyses and a couple other things. By the end of the year, we'll be done with that. So it's not just people we have to worry about or roads. We also have to look at our natural resource environment, and we have a study underway to learn how to better protect our natural resources here in the Keys. We're also looking at our Tavernier Harry Harris Park. It gets slammed every time we have a hurricane and gets shut down. And so we have a grant from Resilient Florida DEP to help make that park more resilient and user-friendly. It's an oceanfront park. And we have 2 brand new living shoreline projects, which I'm really thrilled about. One is Long Key, and that's going to protect our wastewater treatment plant there on the bay side. And the other is Duck Key. So Duck Key and Hurricane Irma, their breakwater was not destroyed, but damaged. And so we're going to repair that breakwater, but we're also going to add in a living shoreline there. Living shorelines are really big in the state now, and Monroe County is jumping on that, and we hope to have many more living shorelines in the future. So these are all with Monroe County. Now, this is what Monroe County is doing with municipalities. So what we've done is we've been working with municipalities for the past several years. Because we've gone through all these projects ourselves, we've agreed to go ahead and help the municipalities do those. So they got their own grants to do watershed management plans and vulnerability assessments, but they asked us to go ahead and carry out that work for them. So they state were able to formally transferred those grants to Monroe County for us to undergo the work. And so we hired a vendor, and now not only are we completing our own work, but we're completing the work on behalf of the municipalities so that by the end, it's more cost efficient and effective to do that. And we can be sure that all the data at the end is apples to apples. So we're happy to help the municipalities out with that effort. We're also underway with their mobile LiDAR survey, and we should be wrapping that up by the end of the year. We're doing it for all 5 municipalities. They're paying for that themselves. We didn't get state funds to do that, just like Monroe County paid for our own. And then at the end, we're going to also do the street elevation planning for the municipalities so that they also have know what roads they need to elevate and when and how high. So this is where we are in the county. We kind of tried to really jump out ahead because we saw what was coming. We already have widespread flooding here. This is what our roads look like during the king tides. They get higher. The water gets higher every year. It gets more widespread every year. We hear from a lot more people every year. So we underwent a roads elevation study. It was to help make the keys more able to withstand to sea level rise impacts so people can get to their homes and businesses and help protect property values. So the keys aren't going underwater. We're going to try to keep them high and dry as much as we can. So the road adaptation plan here that we're looking at. So when we finish the plan, and here's what we know. We're already a little bit behind the game, but at least we know what we need. There's 49 neighborhoods in the areas that need road adaptation or elevation by the year 25, just to avoid the impacts. So obviously we're not going to make it, but here's what we need. That's $888 million. So it's probably about $1 billion now because this was completed over a year ago. By 2030, there's another $180 million worth of projects. 2035, another 160. And then by the end, that 1.6 billion, which is now probably about 2 billion. Then it's not just infrastructure. It's like you heard earlier this morning, we have to put those pump stations in and we have to maintain them. So we're also looking at potential assessments there to maintain these road adaptations and the pump stations that are part of them. So when you look at this, it's half of our miles are going to be vulnerable to road inundation by the year 2045. And that's good news and bad news. The good news is it's only half. The bad news, it's half. And that's where about 75% of our population resides. So our next step is we've applied, we're looking at special assessments potentially to at least pay for the operations and maintenance, perhaps also for part of the capital because $2 billion is a lot of money. We applied last year for 15 road adaptation grants for 180 million. We've been awarded that middle one, Key. We're anticipating award for those other two, the $30 million Upper Keys one and the $49 million Big Copper one. We're really high up on the state's plan. And so together that would be $86 million in road elevation projects with a $43 million match provided by Monroe County, perhaps with a combination of federal funds and resident funds. So we're just getting underway with our big road adaptation program. And, it's going to be interesting how to move forward. The biggest issue is how to fund it. We don't anticipate getting, all of the funds from the state or from us either. So we're looking at all sorts of different matches and matching federal funds. That's what Lisa's really good at, helping us match federal funds with state funds and then local funds. It's going to take a little bit of everything to be able to go forward with these road elevation projects. And that's why we're undergoing the same work within municipalities so that we can help them along and they can help themselves along with that same type of work. They also we're probably looking at about $1 billion in the municipalities. Army Corps plan, you probably heard about that. They came to town, did their plan. It's already been approved by Congress. We have our first word appropriation. We're just so excited for the US 1 shoreline revetments that we're working with DOT and the Army Corps right now to work out that moving forward with the design and elevation of 6 revetments along shoreline stabilizations along US 1. Other parts of the project are elevations of residential structures. There's an awful lot of them, as you can see there, and floodproofing of commercial and government infrastructure. So the total plan is 2.7 billion, 65% federal, 35% non-federal. Doesn't mean it's county or municipalities. It can be residents, can be a lot of different things. And these are just the numbers here for real quickly. You can see even Key West has an even bigger role than Monroe County, but everybody has a really big role. All the municipalities were included in that plan. So we're thrilled to death. It's moving forward. We're looking at now, even beyond the US 1. The breakwaters I told you about, we had those 2, these are 2 more repairs that we're doing. They were damaged. These are rock walls on the ocean side. They were damaged by Irma. We received 2 federal housing and urban development grants to repair them. One's in Tavernier, one's in Key Largo. We just opened the bids and thank goodness they were all within budget. And we're about to meet with the selection committee and move forward with these wonderful projects. Canal restoration, I won't get into a lot of these, but we have an awful lot of canal restorations underway. So our canals are pleasure canals. They're not conveyance canals like they are in the mainland, but they have a lot of problems when they were dug. Some of them are too deep. They're up to 40 feet deep. So we come back in and backfill them to about 7 feet. Other ones we take up to 5 feet of muck from the bottom because all that seaweed comes in and settles down. Other ones we put culverts in. Other ones we put air curtains in to keep out the seaweed. We've done about 12 of them already. We got another dozen planned for the coming year. And we have actually 96 on our total list. I'm not going to go through them all, but So we're really busy also with our canal restoration plan and resilience for our canals. And with that, that completes my presentation. Any questions?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Haig, and we appreciate your being here and making this presentation. And the first question will come from your local county commissioner, the SFRPC secretary, Councilmember Lincoln. You're recognized, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair Geller. I just wanted to say that, yes, Rhonda speaks that fast at all of our county commission meetings as well. And she has the best slide presentations ever. And we always refer back to those after she makes our heads spin. But between her and Lisa, we really do have a good team. And our commissioners are also really committed right now to this huge financial bear we're looking at, and how are we going to get through it. And Sam Kaufman understands as well in Key West. And I think the municipalities, we all do work well together on what we're going to do to protect our infrastructure.
Thank you, Councilmember Lincoln. And Ms. Haig, I did some very, very quick back of the envelope math, and $1 billion divided by 68,000 people is roughly 15,000 per person for every adult child and everyone else in Monroe County, which would be dramatically reduced, assuming that the majority of that will be borne by businesses, and further reduced, that's only $1 billion, which is what you said it would cost. If you had everything together, 2.7 billion, and then you go to 30%, that's gets you back to the $1 billion. So it's not as quite as impossible as it sounds, but it's very daunting. Were there any other questions or comments? Councilmember Kaufman, you're recognized, sir.
Just to add to that, first of all, our mayor in the city of Key West, Terry Johnston, has made this her #1 issue for years. Just to let you know, our general fund ad valorem taxation for the city of Key West amounts to under $15 million a year. $15 million a year for the entire tax base for ad valorem taxation. So yes, 68,000 people, but if you do the math, this is really daunting from a ad valorem taxation perspective. So let's assume worst case scenario, and there is not funding in time. What's the expectation for the elected officials and for our constituents? I mean, I hate to ask the question, but I think it's important for us to be thinking, what worst case scenario?
Ms. Haig?
If we don't get the funding, well,
Barks and houseboats.
there'll be, I can tell you what's going to happen. There'll be a limited use of houses during part-time of the year. So we might have a lot more part-time housing that won't be accessible during the fall king tides and spring tides. That's probably the way things will head if we aren't able to implement the road adaptation program and some of our other resilience efforts.
Did you have any follow-up?
Commissioner Lincoln, I think Commissioner Lincoln.
Councilmember Lincoln, you're recognized, ma'am.
Now, can you hear me? Lisa, do you want to help address that with maybe what we're looking at it with grants and possibly bonds, and what we might do to help us achieve this huge financial hurdle? Or am I catching you off guard? Or, and is it, Sam, is it a rhetorical question?
I mean, I think it's the question of the day, right? And I answers. My connection's a little unstable. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Turn your video off, and then it comes.
Yeah, maybe that's hold on, let me try that. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Okay. I think that's the question of the day. Can you hear me? All right, sorry about that. My apologies. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So yeah, let me just quickly say, I think the financial the financial challenge is the challenge. We know what we need to do. We have the projections, we have the engineering, we know what we need to do. It's how we're going to pay for it. And clearly there isn't going to be a single source of funding. And while the state has clearly stepped up in the last couple of years to pony up funds, a lot of those funds, let's be clear, came from the feds. And they came through the infusion of COVID funds, and those funds are drying up. We need replenishment of future federal funds, and then we need the continued commitment of the state. And then, of course, we need to have the continued commitment of our local constituents in terms of property taxes, assessments, bonding. I mean, it's going to take a lot of political will at both, at all three levels, at the local level, at the state level, and the federal level. And, I don't want to be pessimistic, but I'm not clear that we have that level of commitment at this point. And, information like we've gathered at Monroe County, where we just have a small county, it's coastal, it's an economic engine, and we face $2 billion worth of elevation costs. I mean, I think it's clear, I think it's demonstrative, and, we have to keep doing that. We have to keep painting that picture. We have to keep talking about what our needs are in real ways, and trying to make that pitch. But that political will at all three governmental levels is going to be key.
Well, I will only comment that with what I've been following going on at the national level, I'm no longer as confident as I once was that the federal government will be able to step in and help. So we do have our next speaker on. Are there any final questions? If not, thank you, ma'am. It was I'd like to say interesting. The real word was terrifying, but I'll go with interesting presentation. And we appreciate your being here today virtually. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final presentation today, and after that we have our business items, is from an old friend of mine, Paul Handerhan, who is the state president of FAIR, which is the Federal Association for Insurance Reform, previously the Florida Association for Insurance Reform, but now they've gone national, so it's now a federal association. As everybody is aware, because if you didn't know, you've heard from your constituents, the cost of homeowners and flood insurance is a major issue affecting our ability to continue living in Florida. And we are by far the highest in the nation. You don't happen to have a copy of the SEDS report here, do you? Okay, I remember in the SEDS report, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee for Southeast Florida, produced by the SFRPC, our homeowners insurance was 3 or 4 times, no, actually much more than that. The national average, I think, was around 1,500. I think our average was 8 or 10,000, and it really is affecting affordability, and it's going up again. There are a few people in the state that understand the insurance market as well as Paul Handerhan. So at this point in time, I'd like to recognize Paul Handerhan to give us an update on the current state of Florida's property insurance market, and if you can add to that, the flood insurance market. Mr. Handerhan, thank you for being here today, sir. You're recognized.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Geller and members of the council. I wish my presentation was going to be a little bit more optimistic than the last one, but I think you're going to hear similar themes. I think the best way to start off—
not very optimistic either. If you're worse than that one, we're in trouble.
I don't know if it's worse, but probably a similar theme for sure. I think it's probably prudent for those that maybe don't follow the insurance market that closely to kind of give a little bit of a history to let you know how we got to the point we're at right now. This is going on through the entire state of Florida, not just Monroe County. But Monroe County obviously has had significant insurance challenges going back for many, many years due to its proximity of where it's at in the state and its risk profile. But
And
that
Mr.
has-
Handerhan, the SFRPC is Monroe, Dade, and Broward counties. So we have representatives here from all of them.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And I think it would apply to Tri-County as well. The same type of issue that each county is dealing with is being felt in both Monroe, Dade, and Broward. From a historical standpoint, one of the things that we're seeing in the property insurance market, and this is really accelerated, I would say probably over the past 5 years, there has been a real impact for climate change. Now, that's global warming, sea level rise. You've heard a little bit about that in the previous presentation. But the insurance industry has taken note, more specifically the reinsurance market, which is actually insurance that primary insurance companies purchase to cover themselves in the event of these catastrophic events. And all of these factors having to do with climate change are now being inputted into whether or not these insurance companies are willing to take on this risk. And if they are, what type of pricing structure that they would meet. It's clear by the data that the insurance industry has been collecting. Catastrophic and non-catastrophic weather events have been increasing, not only in Tri-County, but across the state of Florida, in frequency and severity, right? So they've taken note of that. That's being put into the rate base. So that's one of the fundamental things that is really driving the ability for homeowners and property owners to be able to get insurance to cover their property assets, and if they can get that coverage, at what rate they're paying. There's some other factors that have impacted the market. Some of it has to do with the way that the insurance companies were operating going back really to like 2007. Many of you probably remember in 2004, 2005, we had 8 hurricanes that crisscrossed the state of Florida. We had a number of property insurance insolvencies at that time. And the legislature created some new framework to incentivize and attract new risk capital into the state, which was successful. But many of those participants that wind up bringing risk capital to the state had pretty strong business acumen. But from an insurance standpoint, the way that they ran their business models was really, they were chasing growth. They were looking to build their book of business. And one of the ways to do that was really to compete with their competitors on price. So many of these individuals were kind of operating as a low-cost leader. You're probably aware, most property owners are very price sensitive when they go to their agent. They're looking for an insurance product that is in compliance with their mortgage, but also something that they can afford that fits their budget. So many times people would go to their agent, there would be 3 quotes, one for $1,000, one for $1,100, one for $1,200. And that property owner would automatically say, give me the policy for $1,000, not really knowing what was in the policy or how that policy would respond at the time of claim. Just give me the policy that's the cheapest, that gets me in compliance with my mortgage company. So the insurance industry focused on those low cost premiums. And as I would say, probably from 2007 on, we had a lull of catastrophic events all the way up to 2017, which we got hit with Irma. And that model worked okay. But in 2017, when we started to see this explosion of catastrophic and non-catastrophic weather events, unfortunately, those companies were not bringing in enough premium to be able to meet their obligations. Not only that, they had loosened their underwriting criteria. So many of the risks that were on their book were homes that were older, maybe didn't have a lot of mitigation factors. And as soon as the reinsurance industry started realizing losses, starting in 2017, the reinsurance industry and the aggregate Florida industry lost about $1 billion every year for 5 years. So what happened is we had a number of insurance companies go insolvent. We saw another number of insurance companies start to pull out of the state or dramatically start to non-renew the amount of people that they could underwrite. And that was being directed pretty much by their reinsurance partners. So in tandem, that you probably saw 2 things happening. One, this massive amount of non-renewals that were being sent out to policyholders. In tandem, if you could get coverage, you saw this year over year increases in insurance premiums. Obviously, for property owners in the Tri-County area and broader across the state, this has had a significant challenge for them financially in order to procure this insurance and be able to pay for it. So the legislature, as of late, the past couple of years, have done a number of steps to try to stabilize the property insurance market. So that's kind of how we got here. I'd like to share with you my thoughts on where I think we're going in the short term, and then maybe in the longer term, so what you and your residents can expect. Everything that happens in insurance, unfortunately, happens pretty slowly. So any reforms that get enacted, it usually takes about 18 months for those reforms to be fully materialized and felt within the industry. Same thing with rate structures, because policies renew every 12 months. Anytime you have a rate change, whether it's up or down, it goes in when that policy renews, and then it's 1/12 every single month thereon before it actually gets to the insurance company. So these things happen relatively slowly. Some of the things that the insurance or the legislature did to try to stabilize the marketplace is they try to make citizens less competitive. Now that's, if you're a Florida resident in Tri-County, that's probably not something that you want to hear. Citizens is really the insurer, not only the insurer of last resort, but maybe the only insurer that you can get access to because there's not very many private market options. So in their ability to try to make citizens less attractive, the legislature has taken many steps over the years to reduce the amount of coverage that you would get through citizens, and then also to continue to increase the price that Citizens charges to try to incentivize those policyholders into the private market. But if you're in Tri-County and there really is no private market, that really doesn't leave you with any good options. Just of late, Citizens has requested another rate increase of about 13%. The Florida Office of Insurance Regulation is reviewing that right now. They haven't approved it. But if I had to guess, if they don't approve the full amount, they're going to approve some type of rate increase for Citizens policyholders, which will have an immediate impact on property owners in the Tri-County area. I do believe some of the other reforms that were implemented, where they provide some additional public reinsurance capacity. They also address some social inflation issues. That's kind of on the claims side, where maybe there were some third-party actors that were filing claims that were alleged to be suspect. The way that claims are adjudicated in the future, those are all going to have an impact on the rate and the availability of insurance. But I think that's going to be more in the long term. You're probably not going to see a lot of private market capacity come into the Tri-County area until we're like 3 to 5 years out. So we're really talking a long-term effect before you start to see available capacity coming back. And then on the pricing structure, you're probably looking at the same time frame of 3 to 5 years. So in the short term for Tri-County, unfortunately, I think you're going to see year over year price increases. Things are going to get more expensive, not less expensive. You should see, at least in rate, some stabilization, probably in the next 18 to 36 months, I would imagine. So honestly, not great news for policyholders. We do believe that there is going to be new risk capital coming into the state, and we believe that that risk capital is going to be coming into the state probably after November, because that's the end of hurricane season. There's quite a bit of folks who have looked at the new legislative reforms that feel like the market is more attractive with those reforms. But again, it doesn't really make sense for them to become a new entrant into the marketplace in the middle of hurricane season. So it's more likely that those people actually start their plans to operate. And even when they do come into the state to operate, they're probably going to choose to put the majority of their new policies in areas that are outside the Tri-County that have less of a risk profile for catastrophic and non-catastrophic weather events. So the good news is at some point we are going to stabilize this market in Tri-County. The bad news is it's going to take, probably 3 to 5 years till we get there. Some of the things that happen, which are probably very relevant to Tri-County, the legislature did pass some new requirements for flood insurance. It's probably important for you to note there's usually 2 different avenues where you can purchase flood insurance. You can purchase it from the private market, or you can purchase it from the National Flood Insurance Program. The same thing that's happened to the private market and homeowners is happening now to the private market and flood insurance, where their ability to obtain reinsurance has also contracted, which means that their product offerings has contracted as well. And they're being very choosy on where they're willing to write private flood. So it looks like we're kind of reverting back to the National Flood Insurance Program as really being the primary choice of flood insurance for Tri-County and other areas around the state of Florida. That's important because the National Flood Insurance Program just rehauled their entire pricing structure. The way that they used to rate their policies is they would break you into 2 different wind zones or flood zones. You have the special hazard flood zone areas where there is the greatest risk of flood. And then you have the X zones, which are the areas that are at lower risk of flooding. And depending on which zone you were in, that would impact what your rate is. Well, with risk rating 2.0, they're taking a more granular approach at looking at each individual risk, meaning how high your property is above the base elevation, where it's located, what type of construction criteria your house is made of, what type of mitigation factors that you've taken, claims history. They're really looking at now the individual, where the property is located, and what that structure looks like to get you a rate. Now that's more aligned with what the homeowners and property market has done historically, but this is new for the National Flood Insurance Program. There are many people that have gotten their renewals for the National Flood Insurance Program and have seen increases, some of them dramatic increases because of the implementation of this program. But the truth is some people have also seen decreases. It still probably doesn't matter to the person that got the increase. They're not feeling any better about it that someone else maybe got a decrease. But the fact that their flood insurance has dramatically increased is not something that they were budgeting for and is additionally creating more hardships when trying to procure the necessary insurance that they need to protect their family and maybe also to remain in compliance with the secondary mortgage industry. You may be aware there are several states that have banded together that have filed a lawsuit against the National Flood Insurance Program about this implementation of risk rating 2.0, saying that it is having a detrimental effect on their states and the affordability for residences to be able to get flood insurance. Now, obviously, this is a public policy decision that was made. I'm not sure where the litigation is going to end up. It's still in its infancy, but that's something that we're watching. Another legislative reform that happened at the state level, which is certainly going to impact residents in Tri-County area, is the requirement now, if you're with Citizens Property Insurance, which I would say is going to be the vast majority of people in Tri-County, if you're with Citizens Property Insurance and you're located in one of those special flood hazard areas, you are going to be required to carry flood insurance. Now, there's a couple caveats to that. If you're originally, when they passed the law, it applied to all policies. They did make an exemption. So if you're in a condo and you have a unit owner's policy, so example is maybe you're on a condo on the 6th floor, your risk of having a flood is probably very low. So they create a carve out. Those individuals that have citizens coverage that are in a condo unit are not going to be required to cover or have flood insurance. But if you're in a special hazard flood area and you have Citizens Property Insurance and you have wind coverage, then you are going to be required now to purchase flood, whether you have a mortgage or not, in order to have that coverage. Now, if you don't have wind coverage through Citizens, you are not required to have the flood insurance. And then what they're doing is they're kind of creating a glide path where even people outside of the special flood hazard area are, and you're with citizens, are going to have flood insurance as well if you have wind coverage through citizens. And they have a threshold starting in January 2024. If your home is worth $600,000 or more, then you're going to be required. And then it stair steps 100,000 every year thereafter till you get to 2027, where all policyholders in the state of Florida, if you have citizens wind policy and you're not in a condo unit, you will be required to have flood insurance. Now, there's a couple reasons why that public policy was made. One, like we talked about originally, they're really trying to create an incentive for people to get out of citizens, right? So they want citizens to be the insurer of last resort. So they're trying to make the coverage less attractive. And by requiring people, even those who don't have mortgages, to purchase this flood insurance, may encourage them to go to the private market if there's a private market option. The other issue that Citizens is trying to deal with, a lot of times when you have these catastrophic weather events like a hurricane, you have multiple damages, right? So you'll have concurrent causation issues where you'll have wind coming in damaging the structure, but also flood coming in and damaging the structure. And it's sometimes difficult to determine which one of these damages are associated with wind and which damages are associated with flood, and disputes arise out of that that uncertainty of which peril actually created the damage. So by requiring somebody to have the insurance on both, at least there's not an incentive that if I did not carry flood insurance, that I'm going to try to attribute more of the damages to wind where I do have coverage. And hopefully that will take out that moral hazard out of the equation. So I know that was a lot that I kind of laid out there for everybody. I'm going to kind of pause here. I know that was very high level. And if you have any individual questions on these topics or other topics, I'll do my best to address them. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Handerhan, I know you to be a good guy, a good friend, but normally I'm depressed after I listen to you speak. Please don't take it personally. One or two very quick questions, which is number one, although the legislature did take action this year that presumably will eventually reduce insurance rates, a lot of people are saying that as what they've done is also reduce the ability for people that are injured by insurance, by insured events, to fully recover their damages. Can you briefly comment on that?
Yeah, so I think the legislature, and there's two separate bills, and we'll talk about both of them, but the first bill really took a macro approach. And what you're referring to is policyholders' ability when they have a dispute with their insurance company, and let's say they're in a position where they have to litigate the case. Historically, there was a statute 627.428 where if the policyholder or the property owner prevailed in the action, that they could collect their costs for their attorney's fees and whatever expenses they had in the case. This is now shifted that each party is going to be responsible for their attorney's fees and costs, regardless of whether the claim was wrongfully denied. The policyholder would still be. Now, there are certain things that can happen. You can file what's referred to as an offer of judgment or proposal for settlement, where there still can be some fee shifting. There's still ability, if you get a judgment, to bring a bad faith action. But certainly, there is more risk for a policyholder to bring litigation today after the new changes versus in the past. Now, I think the legislature passed that in the special session in December, and then in the regular session, they passed an additional bill, which is called the Insurer Accountability Bill. And this bill is to provide more oversight over insurance companies to make sure that they're meeting the obligations of their policyholders. And if they don't, there will be consequences, financial consequences, examinations of conduct market exams of these insurance companies done by the Office of Insurance Regulation. So the office now has very expansive regulatory oversight of these insurance companies. And in my mind, what I feel like they were trying to do is typically the judiciary was the arbiter of these disputes and these claims. Well, obviously litigation is very expensive. The regulatory bodies between the office and Department of Financial Services, I believe, are saying, listen, we will oversee these insurance companies. And after a time of claim, if they are not treating their policyholders fairly and honestly, we will go in, we will evaluate these companies, and we will hold them accountable. Now, this is all new. It's all new framework. Some of this will be challenged in the courts. We don't know, ultimately where it's going to end up. But it's clear to me what you can see is the state is saying, we want to now fulfill the role of holding the insurance companies accountable instead of having the judiciary do it. But certainly, if you're a policyholder and you had an insurance company wrongfully deny your claim and you had to litigate it, and let's say, your dispute is $25,000 for a roof, it may be very difficult for you to find an attorney, because even if they take 30 or 40% of your claim, that may not be enough to compensate them to fully litigate your case all the way to trial. So that's a concern. And then even if they're willing to take your case on that amount, you'll never be made whole by getting the full $25,000 or $30,000. So after you pay the 30 or 40%, take the case to trial and win, potentially you're going to have to pay your attorney their fees and costs. There may not be much left over anyways for you to complete the roof. Although if you do prevail, you could bring a bad faith action where you can recover those costs. So it's complicated, but certainly you can see the legislature has tried to change the framework to de-incentivize litigation in favor for having the regulatory bodies be more of the arbitrator in claim disputes.
And again, since we're running out of time, the one last question on that is, I think you've heard me say many times that when the big one hits, people will march on Tallahassee with pitchforks and torches, and they'll deserve it. I always used to say will deserve it, because I still think of myself as a legislator. But the problem is, if someone has a 5% deductible on their $500,000 home, and that also excludes their fence and their pool screen and their and they are depreciating the roof. My understanding is people could have $50,000, $60,000 in damages and receive zero from their insurer. And when people realize that, there's going to be a lot of unhappiness. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so you make a great point. Listen, I'm not in favor of telling people how much insurance they need to buy, right? So, but what I do want people to do is I want them to make educated decisions. So if, I go and have a discussion with my agent and he just gives me 3 quotes, 1,000, 1,100, 1,200, and really doesn't explain to me or educate me on what the differences are on these policies and how they're going to respond at a time of claim, that's a big problem, because insurance is not a commodity. In this industry, just like everything in life, there's a first place and a last place between these insurance companies. Somebody's doing it the best and somebody's doing it the worst. And you cannot just say, hey, listen, I want the cheapest price. You need to make sure that you are researching these insurance companies, looking at how they're handling their policyholders and what the coverages are. Now, after you've been fully educated, if I say, listen, I'm willing to retain more risk, okay? I'm willing to have actual cash value, and I'm willing to not have coverage for my screen enclosure. But I know that.
Can you explain what actual cash value is versus RCV?
Yeah, so replacement cost value, the best way to explain it would be, let's say you have a computer, that you bought 3 years ago. Well, that computer now has a depreciated value. If you were going to go try to sell a 5-year-old computer to somebody, they might give you $25 or $50 for it. But when you originally purchased it, maybe it cost you $2,000. If you have a replacement cost policy, it doesn't matter how old the item is or how much wear and tear it has. they'll pay you to buy a brand new computer at today's rates. So if my older computer breaks down by, or it's damaged by a covered loss, they'll pay me the $2,000 to go buy a brand new computer. Now that's more expensive if you want replacement costs. So some people are opting out to have actual cash value, but people need to be aware that, listen, you're only going to get paid the depreciated value of that computer. And this is also the same thing for all the materials in your house would get depreciated by how old they are and how much wear and tear. So as long as you understand the coverages you have, what you're paying for, and that meets within your risk appetite, I think it's okay. But certainly, I think we need to make sure that agents are doing a good job on educating policyholders on exactly what they're buying and exactly what they're giving up, even if it's for a premium discount.
Thank you, Mr. Handra. And by the way, we normally end at 12. Today we'll be ending by 12:30. Okay, Commissioner Furr, no. Are there any additional questions? Are there any additional questions? If not, Paul, I know that you have left a conference to come speak to us. We appreciate that. You can go back to your conference. Thank you. We really appreciate your remarks. They were depressing, but very informative.
Well, I hope to come back and speak to you in the future and give a more positive outlook of what's going on in the marketplace. And I truly appreciate the opportunity to present from you today. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we will now go to our action items, Roman numeral 5. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Kaufman, seconded by, that sounded like Mayor Ross. Is there any debate? Are there any corrections? Are there any corrections? Seeing no corrections, all those in favor of approving minutes of the previous meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Show the minutes adopted unanimously. Leo, since it's already after 12, let's race through our financial report and audit update. Again, I promise everyone will be done no later than 12:30, but hopefully earlier. Okay, Mr. Brasowski, you're up.
I'm here. I don't know if this mic is working. Do you hear me? Good morning, everyone. Thank you for hosting us.
Actually, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for hosting us in Monroe County. It's a beautiful place. Well, if we go to page 1 in our financials, we'll see our comparative balance sheet. We'll see the last 3 months. For the general fund, assets have decreased in $235,169, as well as liabilities and fund balance for the general fund. In the federal, state, and local fund, total assets have increased in $17,456, as well as liabilities and fund balance. In the revolving loan funds, we will see an increase of $3,966 for assets, as well as liabilities and fund balance. And for the Southeast Florida Regional Prosperity Institute, there was an increase of $15 in assets and liabilities and fund balance. If we go to page 2, our financial statements, and this is the main part where we're all interested in seeing, at a 66.67% of the fiscal year lapsed, we have collected 80% of the annual budgeted revenues, and we're at 52% of the expenses, showing a great financial standing for the council.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions? Any questions for Leo? Seeing no questions, is there a motion to approve the financial report? I want to verify we need those approved, correct? Okay. There's a Councilmember Horland moves to approve the financial report. And by the way, did you give the audit update?
Now,
if not, I'll give it right now. It'll be ready this month. We had one member that was a little slow in returning the form, but it will be ready for our next meeting. That was moved by Councilmember Horland, seconded by Councilmember Kaufman. Please call the roll. I'm sorry, Councilmember Lincoln, did you have a comment? Okay. If not, Kathy, I'm sorry?
I'm getting ready for a roll.
Gotcha. Okay, Councilmember, I'm sorry, Kathy, will you please call the roll?
Thank you very much.
You might not be.
Some of them may have left at noon because I'm always done by noon.
I can't hear.
We can't hear the roll call.
Right. Good point.
Sorry about that. Bailey,
Yes.
Kaplan,
Yes.
Corradino. Fur. Goldberg,
Yes.
Portland, Kaufman, Lincoln,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Udine. Yes, was it Udine? Okay, thank you. And Geller?
Yes, by your vote, show the financial report adopted. We are now on the comprehensive plan amendment reviews. I will ask our SFRPC attorney, Mr. Gorin, to read the list of the proposed, and again, this is on consent, read the list of the proposed comprehensive plan amendment reviews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The proposed items under item 4 are as follows. The Town of Davie 23-01 ESR. Number 2 is the City of Hollywood 23-01 ER. Next up is the City of Marathon 23-01 ACSC. It's in the keys. The next up is City of Marathon 23-02 ACSC, City of Oakland Park 23-01 ER, and last but not least for the proposed items, it's City Plantation, Florida 23-01 ER. For the record, Mr. Chair, those are public hearing items. If anyone showed up today to speak for or against the applications today, they have the right to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And let me remind members of the ones with an asterisk are updates as required by the Florida legislature. The public hearing is now open on the proposed comprehensive plan amendment review. Are there any speakers present? I see no speakers present. Are there any speakers online? No speakers online. Please show the public hearing therefore closed. Is there a motion to adopt the proposed, I'm sorry. Yes, we need a motion and then we will call the roll.
So moved.
Is there a motion to adopt the proposed?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Lincoln, seconded by Councilmember Kaufman. Ms. Lurch, please call the roll.
Bailey? Bailey?
Yes.
Kaplan?
Yes.
Fur? Yes. Goldberg?
Yes.
Portland?
Yes.
Kaufman? Yes. Lincoln? Yes. Ross?
Yes.
Udine? I think he's gone, right?
Mhm.
And Geller?
Yes, by your vote, show the proposed comprehensive plan amendment reviews adopted unanimously. I will now ask the SFRPC attorney, Mr. Gorin, to read the adopted plans.
Thank you, Senator Chair Geller. The next up is Monroe County. Back in time. Monroe County, number 23-01 CSC. Next up is the City of Hallandale Beach, 23-01 ESR. The next up is the City of Key West, 22-07 ACSC. Next is the City of Miami Beach, 23-01 ESR. And last but not least, for the public record, the City of Miami Beach, 23-02 ESR. On the record for consideration by the council members, those members of the public who either logged in, signed in, showed up, or otherwise had the right to be heard during the public hearing process. Mr. Chair, Senator, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gorin. Public hearing is now open on the adopted comprehensive plan amendment reviews. I see in the room there are no speakers. Are there any speakers online? Please show the public hearing therefore closed. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Horwin, seconded by Commissioner Furr. Ms. Lurch, please call the roll.
Bailey?
Yes.
Kaplan?
Yes.
Fur? Goldberg?
Yes.
Portland?
Yes.
Kaufman? Lincoln,
Yes.
Yes.
Udine. He's gone? Okay. Oh, that's right, he's gone. Sorry, Geller.
Yes, by your vote, show the adopted comprehensive plan amendments adopted. At this point in time, I would like to recognize our Executive Director, Ms. Cosio, for Resolution 23-1 in reference to Homestead Air Reserve Base. I hope this is adopted because I've already signed the approval. So Ms. Cosio, oh, no, I've just signed it here though. So Ms. Cosio, if you will explain what I've already prematurely signed.
Chair Geller. Council members, you'll remember that in May, we had Rick Miller from the South Florida Defense Alliance at our meeting discussing a threat, a real threat to Homestead Air Reserve Base and its continued operations. This resolution merely states that we support Homestead Air Reserve Base and its continued operations. And Monroe County, I know, has already passed a similar resolution as other partners have as well. So that's it. I mean,
I'm sure this is going to pass, but if Councilmember Lincoln or Representative Mooney have any comments?
No, we're just very appreciative that you all are supporting this as well. And it would be my honor to move this motion.
Moved by Councilmember Lincoln, seconded by Councilmember Kaufman. All in favor, can I do this by voice vote? Okay, all those in favor of adopting Resolution 23-1 pertaining to HARB, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Show that adopted unanimously. It is now public comment period. I see we have a room full to overflowing with people who wish to comment. The public hearing, public comment period is now open. Seeing no members in the room for public comment. Is there anyone online for public comment? All right, so before I close, to be clear, no one in the room and no one online has public comment. Therefore, show the public comment period closed. Before we get to program reports and activities, or actually as part of program reports and activities, before I call on Mr. Tard, I wanted to briefly discuss, as everyone knows, we hold two major conferences a year. One, which will be upcoming in, I believe, October, is the joint one with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. When you combine the 2.74 and 4. When you combine the approximately 4.8 million people from the South Florida Regional Planning Council with the, I have no idea how many people are in Palm Beach, Martin, Indian River, and St. Lucie counties, we should be between 6 and 7 million people, which is close to a third of the population of the state. So we will be holding a meeting with them. We will be discussing what topic that will be on. The last time we had a major conference with them, that was our very highly regarded solid waste. We have come up with 3 proposed topics because, of course, we have to agree with them what it would be. And I will briefly tell you what the 3 we've discussed are, and if anyone has any other suggestions. Again, these are only suggestions that we will offer to the TCRPC. We have to agree with them. But the 3 we have discussed are a follow-up on solid waste, but this time with an emphasis on recycling. Another one would be a follow-up to the mayor's conference we had of Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach on affordable housing. This one with an emphasis on transit-oriented development. And the third one would be on the fascinating but highly depressing topic of insurance, windstorm, and flood. So those are the 3 that we currently intend to offer. If anyone has any additional suggestions, again, we're just talking about ones that we will offer for joint conference. Are there any other suggestions? If not, then we'll offer these three. If anybody has any others in the next, we probably will approach them. I will be on vacation shortly, so probably mid-July. If anybody has any other suggestions, please contact Ms. Cosio or Sam Gorin. Obviously, I don't need to tell you, we are governed by sunshine, so please do not contact me directly. And finally, on the other conference that we have, which is just a SFRPC, as I mentioned at the last one, Senator Garcia, now Senator Council Member Garcia from Miami-Dade, is truly passionate in the area of mental health, particularly pertaining to where people with mental health issues will be living. And so we have indicated previously that it is our current plan, subject to, you know, additional ideas from members of the SFRPC, to make that our winter conference and have Senator Garcia take the lead in that area. So that's just announcements as to what our upcoming programs will be. Those are not at our regular meetings. Those will be the large ones that we are expecting somewhere between 100 and 150 state and South Florida leaders to attend these conferences. They've been very well received. So at this point in time, I saw Mr. Tart waiting patiently. Mr. Tart, can you give us the report on the SFRPC revolving fund status?
Sure, yes. Good afternoon. Senior Loan Officer and Manager of the Revolving Loan Funds. I'd like to provide this quick update in regards to our CARES Act RLF fund, which began back in July 2020 to date. The program has now provided over $7 million to 34 businesses that were impacted by COVID. And as a result, we're provided the capital assistance and technical resources needed to stabilize and grow their businesses. In Monroe County in particular, the SFRPC assisted 5 businesses with capital in excess of $1 million. This program continues its outreach in all 3 counties with efforts to assist new prospective borrowers with both access to capital as loans are repaid and technical assistance with support from our local partners in each county. In regards to the traditional RLF, this program continues to perform well with total assets of $5.5 million. We serve 30 borrowers. Goran Charaf, our legal counsel, continues to provide us informative updates on our 3 borrowers in legal collection, and further details on that could be found in your attached RLF status report. Separately, I'm glad to announce that the SFRPC has a successful Brownfields Cleanup Revolving Loan Fund, which was recently awarded $1.5 million for a new assessment and remediation grant for our South Florida region. And as a result, we were contacted by the by an environmental consultant representing Habitat for Humanity of Key West and the Lower Florida Keys to help explore funding for assessment and cleanup of a brownfield site there. It's located in Middle Torch Key, and we're currently reviewing this site assessment with the EPA. Thank you all again for your support and as we're making a considerable impact in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Chart, I believe you've mentioned this at a prior report, or let me actually ask Ms. Cosio. I believe that our revolving loan funds were recently honored in some fashion, or others were based on our program. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, thank you. Oh, thank you, Chair Geller. Well, we've won numerous awards for our revolving loan funds, and we're only one of 2 councils that run revolving loan funds in our state. The other one being Appalachia Regional Planning Council, but ours is much larger. It's been in effect for 25 years, and then the CARES. But Jeff could certainly provide additional detail about specific awards, but I will say that we were, EDA profiled us on their website for our very well-run RLF, which Jeff has been managing.
And when you say EDA, you're referring to the United States Department of Commerce, Office of, what is it, Economic Development Administration, federal.
Federal, yes. We're a poster child for them. Good way.
Okay, right, thank you. And Mr. Tart, quick question, last question. To what extent, if any, do we still have loans available to make assets available to fund loans in each of the two established ones, not the new one, but the two established, the revolving loan and CARES revolving loan?
Sure. In our CARES Act, we have about $60,000 currently available for small businesses that need assistance. Our RLF is fully committed at this time, but we do have a prospect report that we maintain. So as those funds get repaid every month, we explore possibilities of lending those back out and funding them. So we do have a small amount of funds available, but we get paid a significant amount of money back each month. So it's a constant ongoing effort to deploy those funds, which we do.
Are there any additional questions for Mr. Tart? If not, thank you, sir. And by my watch, we have 7 minutes left before we adjourn and turn into pumpkins. Executive Director, Ms. Cosio, you're recognized.
Yes. Thank you, Chair Geller. So I would like to again thank Monroe County, recognize their great assistance in putting this meeting together, and also to thank Representative Mooney once again for joining us. He's always helpful to us. I also want to recognize council staff, particularly Kathy, Leo, and Alicia, who came down last night and prepared everything here along with Monroe County staff. Very grateful. I want to mention, as you know, we have been working on the Department of Defense Military Installation Resilience Review since 2021. Next Monday, June 26th, and many of you should have received an invitation, but we will follow up, is the quote unquote final meeting at Homestead Air Reserve Base. As a reminder, this resilience review, the first in the state of Florida, looks at 4 installations: Naval Air Station Key West, Homestead Air Reserve Base, Southcom, Army Garrison, and Doral, and the Ocean Measurement Facility in Dania Beach. A lot of work, a lot of good outcomes, and we're working already with DoD to identify funds to implement the resilience improvements that have been identified through this process. So again, I will be following up. I hope you all will be able to join us. If you will have to fill out, I saw in the invitation that there are some security protocols to go through. And again, I spoke with your staff, Representative Mooney, and I hope that you're able to join us. It's available in person, but also by Zoom to be convenient. Moving on, I want to go ahead and remind you once again, if you have not filled out your Form 1 or Form 6, they are due July 3rd. I emailed everybody that did not have a record of having submitted it with the information they need to move that forward. I also want to just update briefly on the solid waste conversation, recycling conversation that Miami-Dade County has entrusted us with, working with their staff, Senator Garcia, that we have been meeting on a regular basis with Miami-Dade County staff. And I think we're making good progress and hope to have a report for you soon. In addition, I guess in closing, I just want to really ask you to take a look at the highlights. I won't go through it, but we have here significant accomplishments from your staff. And it would be great for you to have it, because also not only are you our board member, you're also our advocate in the community, highlighting the work that the council is doing with your guidance and our really great staff. So with that, thank you all for being here and a great meeting. And I pass it back to you, Chair. Well, actually, I think it's Sam's turn now. Oh,
I think it's dead.
Let me give this back to Archie. Thank you.
Hear me now? No, it's still alive. And Mayor's Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sam.
Attorney Gorin, you're recognized, sir.
Time is short and I would choose not to extend this discussion, but if you would just look at the report we issued in recent days regarding the pending litigation, I'm loath to comment on the substance.
I was going to ask you not to comment on anything in that litigation that has not been filed as a matter of public record.
If you would look at the last paragraph in the item regarding the Dawson litigation, there was a recent order of the judge that is meaningful to the client here, all of you publicly, and also the potential for us filing a motion for summary judgment, which we intend to do. If you could, just one more minute of your time.
Go
I
ahead.
didn't realize this, but the Dawson case, and I can say that because it's fact, goes back to 2018. It's a case in court for the past 5 years. I'm not suggesting bad things about the judicial system, but the end result is that there are ways to work with that system to get to a different answer. So,
And that is what happens when the defendant is an attorney.
absolutely. So
Okay.
that being said, the other two matters are self-explanatory in the context of defaults being entered, et cetera. I can't thank Jeff Tart and the professional staff of the council enough for how they cooperate and coordinate with us to get to a better place for you in the litigation side. That's all I have today. Thank you for listening.
Okay, if anyone has any questions about the contested litigation, please contact Mr. Gorin directly if you are an SFRPC board member. Again, we prefer not to be discussing litigation in public. Are there any council member reports? Good, because we have 3 minutes left. Ex officio, Dat Win. Oh. Gotcha. Okay. Mr. Villaboy. Okie dokie. Mr. Moore from DEP? Not on. Great. I believe that concludes the agenda. However, are there any announcements?
Yes, simply, I want to let you know that we need to update the date for the joint conference, because the joint conference was originally scheduled for October 20th. Treasure Coast has been working on identifying a facility. It looks like it's going to be on October 27th, which is a Friday, in West Palm Beach. So unless someone objects to that, that's the date we have on the books right now, October 27th in West Palm Beach. And again, you heard the great topics we'll be talking about potentially.
Right. And actually, I may object to that only because what we can't do is have every year the joint conference in Palm Beach and then just the joint meeting in and the SFRPC. So if we had the conference last year in Palm Beach, we should have this year's conference in Broward and go up to Palm Beach for a joint meeting. So we'll have to discuss that, right?
Well, maybe.
Tentatively, we're not sure. Okay, of course, if we do it down here, then we have to find a facility. Right. We're going to do all of the heavy lifting anyhow, like we did last time. Any rate, are there any, we have about 30 seconds. Are there any additional comments or announcements? If not, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Furr, second by Councilmember Lincoln. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed or welcome to wait here.
Yeah.
Show the meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Excellent.